Hello again, and a very warm welcome to Sweet Omagh Town Internet Radio. And as I look to my right, I see a vision that resembles Declan Ford. How are you today?
I am very well. Do you know, I had a little bit of good news today.
You stayed out of the garden?
No, I was in the garden. I was my garden leave has extended some considerable time. But you know, Donald, that I am interested in the past. Well, I got a DNA test done, and I got the results back the other day. And I imagined,
I'm worried.
In my youth, I used to have fair hair, so I imagined that I was a Viking. You know, that deep down in my soul there was Viking blood. And guess it came back. Guess what I am?
I would say you're Irish.
100%. And not only Irish, but it actually pinpointed the exact area, and it really would be kind of North Leitrim, bordering on to Fermanagh, going down to County Monaghan and a wee bit of County Louth. And you can actually find people that you're related to. And I thought this was a bit of a con, you see, so I thought I'd try it anyhow. But one of the individuals that has been identified as a fourth cousin is indeed a fourth cousin, because I've already been in contact with him. And he had done a kind of a family tree on his side. So there is an accuracy to it. But I genuinely thought that I would have, blood or a DNA from further afield. And I must admit now, all cordon aside, I was a wee bit taken aback.
Right. What do you send off, a swab or something?
I don't want to go into too much
Please
detail. All right, you get a little tube and you... bit like yourself.
A tube gets a tube. Go ahead.
And yeah, you actually put you fill it up with it's quite disgusting, saliva, which actually is quite difficult to do, believe it or not. And it's only, you're talking about a wee thing about the width of slightly wider than a pencil, and it's only maybe just 2 or 3 inches. And you send this off, and I think it initially went away to Dublin and then over to Germany. And it took about 8 weeks. And I must admit I was intrigued. And you actually then get results of people who share elements of your DNA. And looking at one of these who would be a fifth cousin, in her family tree are the names or the surname of my great grandfather.
Get away.
I'm telling you, it is amazing. And in this lockdown, I have got so involved and interested in looking into the past. I mean, for example, did you know that there is an Irish government website, www.irishgenealogy.ie, that is totally free, and that will give you births, marriages and deaths back to 1864. Well, for Ireland up until the partition. Right. And further afield if you're in the...
I thought a lot of those records were destroyed in Dublin.
No, I think the records prior to 1901 were destroyed in the Four Courts. But some of those records actually exist. Now, if anybody in the great ether out there was interested, you can get the 1901 census, the 1911 census for Ireland. And you can also then go back to Griffith's valuation from the I think the 1840s. And I mean, I can take the grandparents back to the first decade of the 19th century, 1810. Yeah. And I know where my family emanated from, but I can't get any more information than that, And it is fascinating.
Ford, I would have thought, was an English name.
McGuigan would be an Irish name. And though my father always maintained that the Fords were from Galway originally, but his side of the family were all Monaghan, County Monaghan. My mother was up County Fermanagh. And then her mother was from Leitrim. So we're we didn't travel too far.
Yeah. And on a serious note, I mean, there's a lot of good work done now with this, because people who need sort of stem cell work for blood cancers and stuff now can get into the Anthony Nolan Trust, which is a big trust whereby people of up to a certain age can donate their saliva, and then they can be on a register. And if someone who needs a stem cell, then they can be contacted with it. So,
I mean, it is just incredible, the way that science has developed
Yes.
and the immediacy of it now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think it's just great, you know. And I
Are you
remember.
interested in that? Are you interested? So who do you think you are, sort of stuff? Is that what-
No, that's a bit too show business or busy for me, you know. And I find it a wee bit hard at times to buy into that, into the inevitable tears. You know, when they think of they go to
good TV though.
oh, it makes good TV, but go to some creator that outside of the family you've ignored all your life, and then be filmed, putting flowers from some garage onto it, and sort of.
You're very
and
cynical in your
I
old
wonder
age.
how many times they actually revisited the graves. You know,
I know.
on Cemetery Sunday, did they go back? You know, no, I find that a wee bit it can be a wee bit excessive. As you know, Donald, I wouldn't be one to wear my heart on my sleeve, and I think at times that can be a bit too much, too cloying for me, you know. But what I like about the family, the family history is actually then when you meet relatives or distant relatives, you actually then begin to see kind of traits. Like, for example, this very simple thing. My father could be quite severe at times, and the tone would change when he was giving off to you. And I found as my children were growing up, I became him, and I began to speak like him, you know.
Yes.
And even then he would stand in a certain way at the sink and look out into the garden, and I would find myself adopting the same pose, you know. So I think we kind of become, what reared us in a strange way at times,
We do,
you know.
we do indeed.
You know.
Well, speaking of fathers, my father didn't say much, but God, he gave you a look.
Oh, aye.
If you got, we call it the dirty look. If you got a look, say he was having a conversation with some of his friends and you interrupted or said something, he just never broke conversation. He just gave you a look as if to say, God help you when these people leave.
That's right. That's right. Or I know,
dear.
and for goodness sake. And I remember growing up, you being by 7:30. Listen to the days when youngsters actually went out into the street and played. We lived in Uri, you see, for a number of years. And my father would be standing the back door with the arm raised. Now, he never clipped us, but you were always terrified that he would.
Yes.
You know.
Well, my father was the same. He wasn't a violent man at all. In fact, I don't think he ever had it. But he had that authority. And he commanded that, I suppose. And then I suppose that was his way of bringing up 7 young lads to keep them under control. But
Yeah. Well, I was actually listening today to Radio 4.
Right.
And there was an interview, and somebody quoted, they were talking about parenting, and somebody quoted Danny DeVito, and the American actor,
Yeah.
comedian.
Yeah.
And he was talking about being a father and being a parent. He says, it is not your job to be your offspring's friend, you are a parent.
That's
And
good advice.
I would fully agree with it.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
When I hear people saying my son or daughter's my best friend, I think, oh no.
Oh, no.
There's a certain place for that, but I don't think so now.
No, it's like,
Anyway.
I totally agree. It's like having, I know people who talk about the rock, and it was like a geological kind of conference. I went to a party once, and somebody was referring to that many rocks. I cringe when I hear that. I like the distance that being a parent gives you.
You're like me. When you go to these weddings and you hear they're very close family.
Yeah. Oh, no. No. Give me a bit of honesty.
Yes.
Honesty, but being a parent it's a serious job.
Yeah.
It's a serious job, and if it's done with good humour and a discipline.
Yeah. And the funny when I listened the other day to that Ben Kelly program, and he said that he had those who lay in the graveyard when he was alive, obviously, had more influence over him than many people alive. I wonder, is that true for all of us? Do we find that maybe our parents or significant people who are not in our lives but who have left, but still we live our lives in ways that they would be pleased with?
I think, I remember I had a great conversation once with Colm Sands, the great folk singer from Mayo Bridge, now living in Rust River.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to him just about, as you know, I would write poems and the odd song, and I said, Colm, it's strange that I would never have been able to do this when my father was alive. And he says, the way I look at it, he says, you are a ship and your parents are the anchors. And when the anchors are removed, you just sit out on your own path. And that was a lovely way of saying it. You know, but I think your parents, they're always there in the background. And sometimes you have more conversations with your parents, you know, when they die than when they were alive. You go through imaginary conversations.
Yes, yes.
And sometimes the guilt comes in and whatever, all kinds of things. You do something and you say something. You think, oh,
We and
I
I
should have done
have
that.
talked at length about not living in the past. Well, we love to look at the past and record it. Certainly, you and I don't live in the past.
Oh, not a bit. Not a bit. Hard enough to live in the present at times. So
Yeah,
let's live in the future.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that you learn from the past, for goodness sake, and
Yes.
you know, this will be the past, you
Yeah.
know. So we kind of, you live for the moment, you know, but you live as dignified a way as you can, you know.
Right. Speaking of the moments,
Yes. Today is broadcast.
today is broadcast day.
Well,
Tell
I
me what-
believe our broadcast today is the late Peggy McGuigan.
Yes. In a word, yes. Now, why that is, because somebody had mentioned to me some time ago about that interview, and I thought to myself, well, it's here now, and we're going to have a quick listen to it. Peggy was one of the very first interviews we ever done. For those who don't know Peggy McGuigan, she would have worked in the Omagh post office when she was a young girl. And, you know, she said, don't put this on tape now, she says. But she says, I retired in 1960 out of the post office on health grounds. And she was 101, Declan, when she spoke to us.
That's right. Oh, she was,
But don't tell them that. She says, Peggy, your secret's safe.
her
with me."
secret is safe until now.
Well, you know.
Until now, she was a remarkable woman,
Wasn't she
and
just? Yeah.
her memories of Drumore, where some of my father's family came from, really, in a way, opened a door for me. Oh, she was a marvellous woman, wasn't she?
Oh, lovely lady, lovely lady. She remembered, we talked about the war, she started talking about the First World War,
Oh,
remember?
That's right. That's right.
And making up pension books for the guys who had fallen during the Battle of the Somme.
That's right. That's right. And she talked about life in the Drumore before the First World War.
Yes.
You know, and that was, I mean, that's remarkable, you know, to have that conversation. And she was 101, I think,
Yeah.
when we interviewed her.
Do you know the thing about it? She said she trained in Offaly, which seemed a bit strange, and then she went to somewhere in London, and then back here till Belfast again, and various places like that. Would you think that, those were the days of the Empire, and Ireland
Yeah.
was all one in those days as part of the British Empire? So
That's right. Well, in fact, I had two great uncles from Drumore. Their name was O'Farrell. And they did an entrance exam, which I think was open across various civil service branches, and the post office was part of that. And the two of them went over to London as postboys, and they were only maybe 15 or 16. And so they obviously could sit an exam here, and then you were given a posting. You know, and that, I say that's the way Peggy got into it as well.
yeah, and I say she was one of the probably first people ever to actually use and learn Morse code.
That's right.
You think of it?
It's amazing, you know.
Yeah.
You know, funny we were talking about just genealogy. My great grandfather married a lady in Dunsany, and her father was the postmaster. And now we're talking about the 1850s.
Yes.
And she was, it was something not like a radiographer, but it was obviously in some early days of that Morse code, you know, a radiologist. I think that's what it was.
Right.
Amazing, you know. But I went down, you know, to Dublin Castle, and the post office have got a lovely wee museum in Dublin Castle. And you can see the history of the post office in Ireland. Well worth a visit if you're ever down in Dublin.
Right.
It's a free museum, and you can get some records there. But we were given an insight into it firsthand, and I didn't realise at the time how valuable that was.
Funny you talk about family history. My grandfather's first wife died, and we didn't realise that she died an earlier part of the week, and by the weekend they lost their only son as well. They had three, and the two older daughters, and then the mother, she died on a Tuesday, and I think by the following Saturday their only son died as well, who was just days old. And it's tough times when you think of it, and those were never talked about in our family.
No. And you know, it is so interesting that Peggy McGuigan was our inroad into that world.
wasn't it?
You
Yes.
know, her world was at the tail end of the Victorian era and the early days of the Edwardian era.
Yeah, and the hiring fairs and stuff.
Oh.
She was about a woman when that was happening and
Yeah.
worked about there, you know. And when you think of it, and she remembered Omagh before electricity. There was no electricity even in the post office, and she remembers the lamp-lighters going around Omagh, light the lights at night to light up the roads and things.
You know, and we're kind of accustomed to that, even the phrase, the hiring fair. And
Yes.
most of us will have an inkling as to what that was about. I was talking to a relation of mine in Belfast a couple of weeks ago, and I talked about the hiring fair, and she was aghast. She had never heard of a hiring fair. When I explained what it was, you know, you could see her jaw dropping. That to her it was so alien. But it was a way of life here.
Yes.
I remember we did a great interview with John McKinney.
His mother was hired, as was my grandmother. Yeah,
Mhm.
she was hired because my grandfather had no one to look after the children. He brought into the town and got him a young lady to come and look after children for in the house, and then end up getting married and staying here. So,
Yeah.
strange world, isn't it? You look
And
back-
it's a history that really has been kept in a way under wraps.
I suppose, was it a form? Was like, you know, a bit like people being deported to Australia. Was that something they didn't talk about till now, and then now it's a great badge of honour?
Yeah. And it was interesting that John McKinney saw it as a
Yeah.
very positive thing,
He did.
because he said that so many entrepreneurs came out of it,
Yes.
and women who were given the power to make a world and a life for themselves.
Mm.
You know, so that was an interesting twist on it, and I was glad to have that conversation with John, because I was pretty black and white about it
Yeah.
initially,
Mm-hmm.
but he made me see that it was grey.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I suppose in all adversity there's some equal or better opportunity for people to move on, and that's and I suppose it's the same with this whole current situation we're going through at the minute. There are people who will cope with it, and people sadly who will maybe
well,
not.
you know, I do think, why not down the line do we not do a separate programme on this, and maybe ways of coping, or the way it might have affected people?
Yeah,
What do you think?
That's all right. I'm good for it if you are.
Yeah.
Who would you talk to? And what would you talk about?
I think there's going to be a lot of people who will find it difficult to go back to work. There'll be a lot of people who will find it difficult even to get used to socialising with others. And there'll be many people whose lives, I think, will have changed. You think, for example, you think of that generation for whom religious service attendance was a matter of a potential, perhaps mortal sin by non-attendance. When that is all stopped, how have their lives been, or how have their lives been changed by that?
Yes.
Where suddenly what you took for granted and you assumed was, this is the way. It's suddenly it's all turned on its head.
Yeah, and I think the ritual of burying the dead and the wakes in Ireland, especially this part of Ireland, the people that lost that part of the farewell will have serious issues over this. As you know, that I wear another hat in bereavement support that I do, and there's so many people are coming forward now who have lost people over the last 3 or 4 or 5 months, with serious anger issues because they feel that maybe they couldn't get to their mother's funeral or father's funeral, or someone close to them had died and they couldn't go there and express that, and that adds to the pain of it, So there's a lot to talk about, is right?
Well, I think we definitely should do that, because I think there are a lot of people out there who could maybe benefit from maybe just hearing different views.
Yes. That's if they all haven't slashed their wrist taking with this conversation before this. For God's sake, cheer us up, will you?
Oh, yes, indeed. No, but I look forward to tonight's broadcast.
Right, okay.
I have great memories of Peggy McGuigan.
She was a lovely, lovely lady.
She was.
So
She was very kind and very generous.
generous with her time and generous with, she was very unassuming, as most Omagh people are. Lived a very life and seen so many changes. You think what she would have seen, Dr. From.
So I'm looking forward to hearing it,
Yes,
But
yes.
come here. Did you see the numbers for the Ferna Cottage programme?
I did. Here is the problem, or not the problem, really, is this is a programme for people who I think live alone and don't really have a lot of company, who want to just sit and listen to it. And it's great, and I'm delighted. But I got a letter at the weekend. I know there's thousands, and almost some cases over 10,000, and some numbers that could hit twice or treble that because we're only getting the numbers from one side. When that's shared in other formats, we don't get the numbers. One programme has reached in excess of 23,000 listeners.
Goodness.
So, but that's not what this is about, because it's not about audiences, because, I mean, commercial radio is about audiences, and that has destroyed radio for me.
Yeah.
Because then the advertisers start to dictate
That's right.
what people get to listen to, not the people themselves.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's it, you know. But there is an audience out there for the kind of reminiscence and the storytelling and the interviews with people who are on the surface. You may think, what can they talk about? But what they talked about was just extraordinary.
Got a lovely letter from a lady from County Louth, originally from Omagh,
right,
who would have been very friendly with the late Michael O'Neill.
Oh, yes.
Lived beside him, and then she said that was just her Omagh of her era. And she lives obviously now down with her daughter, but she says her daughter comes home and they listen to these sort of every weekend or something, and she says it just means so much to her. That to me is the special part of this. You know, the fact that 24,000 people listen to it, I'm very delighted and more than happy to do that. But it's not a commercial interest.
Absolutely not. No.
Because they wouldn't have a commercial side to it, because it wouldn't work commercially, because we have different time frames and different subjects. So it's a matter of reminiscing and enjoying what we're doing.
The interviews we have done and the interviews we will do are not for commercial gain. They are there just to acknowledge people, let them tell their story, and they're there forever.
Glad they're enjoyed, and glad they've been digitised, because I tell you, it's if anything that's good in this current situation is, these would have been probably lost otherwise, because they were boxed and ready to go.
And the time was telling, I think, with the formats. You know. So.
Yes. Well, things have changed. You know, when you look around here and you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different formats for playing audio. Right. All analog, and then to have it all digitised and compiled now, it's a job worth doing.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Ford, don't talk about gardening. Just talk to me about anything else what you're going to do for the rest of the day or week.
I shall be going to Glasgow very shortly.
Oh no.
Oh yes, I have relatives in Glasgow. I'm going to call over there to see them, and looking forward to that. I'm not going to fly. I shall go by the ferry.
So this is a result of getting your little ancestry test, and you go knocking every door now.
No, I actually.
Here's Declan Fester.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I actually have a great aunt of mine married a man called McAleer, and they were. My great aunt was Lizzie O'Farrell, and she married Thomas McAleer, and they're both from Dromore, County Tyrone. And she was about 18 or 19 when she got married, and they went over to Glasgow. And I think he worked on the railways, and I am trying to find out. They had quite a big family, so I'm sure they just can't wait for the day the rap will come to the door, and their long lost relative will be standing.
And we'll leave you now with the memories of the late and great Peggy McGuigan. Until we see you again, have a great weekend. We'll see you. Bye bye.
I'm originally from outside Dromore, town now called Lettery. I was born there in 1898.
Right. And how long did you live there?
I lived there until I was about 14. I went to school there.
And then did you come into
From
Omagh?
that, I went to school in Belfast, the Civil Service College. I entered the post office.
Right. And did you work in Belfast then?
No, I worked in England, and I worked down the south of Ireland. And I came to Omagh on holidays and was offered a job in Omagh.
Well, whereabouts down south did you work?
More, awfully.
Right, in what line? In the civil service?
The post office.
The post office.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when did you come back to Omagh?
Came back in 1922.
And what did you do then?
I worked here in the post office.
Whereabouts was the post office then?
It was down below the town hall there.
And could you tell me about what it was like to work in the post office then?
That's just handy. I didn't think anything of it anyway. I lived in Woodside Terrace.
And what?
That's beside the barrack. It was blew out of it one night, a bomb. That's what has me down here.
That's one of our more recent bombs.
I lived 50 years in Woodside, and then threw out of it one night.
Right. Right, and then came here to Strathroy. Well, tell me then about what did you do in the post office? What did your job consist of?
At that time, we had our telegrams, and we had the Morse code train, you see. So we had to do it by Morse. It wasn't on phones, the way they do everything now.
Right, and what exactly had you to do?
Take the message, you see. They sent it in Morse, and we read it. And then I did the counter work too, of course, and sorting office work.
Right. And could you tell me what a typical day would have entailed when you worked on the counter?
Well, I wouldn't work all day. I might work 4 hours at the counter and 3 somewhere else. I didn't work all day at one place.
Well, you must have seen a lot of changes in Omagh.
Well, I have, I suppose. I'm here 72 years now. So.
And what about the town itself?
Well, the town has changed. The shops are changed and that, you know. When you believe that I haven't been in Omagh town for about 4 years and I'm living here, yet I never was in the town.
Right. Oh, you're so far out from the
I
town.
go to the shop over there for anything I want.
Right. Can you remember any shops in particular or any shopkeepers?
Well, O'Reilly's, there's a draper shop.
Right.
And there was Johnson's, of course. Jim Johnson and the brother had a shop, a clothes shop too. Well, Mike Gallagher, he was 2 doors from the post office. He had a shop there. The Home of Colonia had a shop next door to the post office.
Right. And that was a kind of a drapery?
No, it was a grocery place.
Grocery, right.
Home of Colonia.
Right. Well then, what were conditions like in the post office to work in? Was it a pleasant enough place?
Oh, it was. I liked it. We got on well together.
And what time did you start at?
Well, different hours every week. You changed duties every week.
Right.
Sometimes I had to be on till 8 o'clock in the morning.
And what time did you finish that then?
I finished that week. I'd finish about 5 o'clock. We had to work every day except Saturday.
Every day except Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you spent all your working life in the post office then in the town?
I did. I spent all my years there. Well, then I wasn't well, so I gave it up. I retired.
Well then, to take you way back to Dromore again, can you remember who taught you in Dromore? What school you went to and who taught you?
Well, as a matter of fact, I had a sister teaching in the school I was in.
Right. Did she teach you?
That's Harry's College mother.
Well, can you remember what school was like then? Were the teachers
Right across. Although I suppose I never had any leave to be cross with me, but I mean, I always found it pleasant enough, but it could be very strict, you know.
Right.
Master Gallagher taught me, but my sister taught in another department in the same school. I used to take her place when she wasn't there.
You went up then to Belfast, the Civil Service College. Why did you decide to go into the post office?
Well, as a matter of fact, it wasn't me decided at all. I knew nothing about it until my brother, he was a teacher in Armagh. He made all the arrangements and told me then what to do. Sent me off.
You had no option but
I had
to
no
go.
option to go. I remember crying for a week before I left.
And did you have to do an entrance exam before you went into the post office?
Oh yes, there was an exam set by the Civil Service in London. Civil Service Commission is then. The Ireland wasn't cutting to that time.
Right. Well, did you do the exam here in Omagh, or did you have to go?
No, I had to go to Belfast to do it.
Right. And what was it like to go to Belfast then from?
Well, you see, when I went to school there, I sort of was used to it, you see. I stayed with the nuns and went out to school every day.
Whereabouts did they
In
stay?
Royal Avenue, the school was.
And then where did the nuns live?
On Bryson Street, on Newton Ards Road.
Did you how long did you stay in Belfast?
Well, I must have been in it. I stayed till I got the exam anyway. I don't know how long it was. It was about a year maybe, not very long.
Did you have any say over where you then worked, or did they just send you to various places and you just?
No, you see, when you did the exam, you did it for a certain place. I did one for Dublin, but didn't happen to get it. There was another girl got the job. And I did one for the Princess. I did the Princess for England. That's why I come to be in England.
What part of England?
Bedford.
Right. How long did you stay there?
I stayed there about it was only about a year when I was appointed then, and I went to Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire. And I was there a couple of years when I looked to get back to Ireland, so I got back to Burr.
Right. And had you come back and forward to Ireland in between?
Oh yes, I'd come home on holidays.
And were there big differences between Ireland and England then?
No, I didn't see much difference. I was young and foolish then.
And how long did you spend down in Burr?
About 2 years it was. And I came home on holidays. And my sister worked in the post office too. And she was working in Omagh. She had worked in Carlow before that, and she got transferred to Omagh to be near her home. And she said to me, the postmaster told you to call when you're home on holidays, to call to see him. So I called him, and he says to me, there's a vacancy here if you'd like to take it. So I took it. And I'm here in Omagh since. That was 1922.
In Dromore did you live?
I was out in the country. I'd run a farm.
Right.
And Lettery was the town land was Lettery.
Right.
I have 4 nephews still living there.
Do you know a place called Cornamuck?
That's in Dromore too. But
My granny was from there.
was she?
Her name was Mary Farrell.
Oh, I
And her
remember.
brother was a fellow called Johnny Farrell. He played the fiddle and he died.
I remember Farrers.
Yeah.
I remember them going to Mass
Right.
in Dromore.
Well, my granny's father had been an RAC man from Longford, and he came to Dromore, and he took early retirement, and he bought a farm in Cornamuck.
I remember the Farrells. I remember Minnie.
That's my granny. Minnie Farrell was my granny.
Was she?
She was indeed.
I remember Minnie Farrell, right.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Right, and then her brother Johnny, I think he lived in the home place.
I did.
And
He was a quiet sort of fella.
so I believe. So I
Never
believe.
bothered much about anybody. That's
Minnie Farrell,
fine.
that's my granny.
And I knew Minnie well. Me and you I didn't know her. I never really met her. But I knew it. Knew her to see in the church and
Right.
passed her on the road. And
She
I
got
know.
married in 1913.
Yeah.
in
She
St.
married. Who did she marry
Nicholas. A
now?
man called Patrick Ford.
That's right.
He was my grandfather. He was an instructor. He was in the RAC.
Mm-hmm.
He was an instructor in the depot,
Mm-hmm.
and his people had moved to a place called Lissanedden. His
Well-
people worked, which I think was between Dromore and Fintona.
Listen, Eden.
Yeah, Lissanedden.
The Fords, that where it's from.
Hmm.
I knew those folk.
They worked on the railways,
Uh-huh.
and they lived in an old railway cottage there. So it's
funny,
It's
isn't
a
it?
small world. It's a small world. But I thought it was lovely to hear about my great uncle Johnny and the people clubbing together to help him out. It was
That's
nice
right.
kind of community
He was
atmosphere.
a very quiet. I remember him now too, going to Mass and all. And he was very quiet. Didn't speak a lot to people.
Mhm. Kept very much to himself.
Mm-hmm.
Very much to himself. Do you remember much about those days in Dromore? Growing up in Dromore?
And I don't remember much about them now.
Mhm.
I've got too old now to remember.
Do you remember the war years in Omagh? The war years when the Americans came over.
I was.
Were you hearing?
I was in Omagh. I was in Omagh in the First World War. I was in England.
Right, for the first World War.
I was there when the war ended. I remember the day the war ended.
Right, what was it like? Just
Mad. They
one-
just went mad out on the streets. The soldiers and all the people out bawling and shouting about. And the post office was crowded with telephones and shit. It was awful.
Right,
That was 1918.
right. Your head would have been daved with all the Morse code messages then. All the congratulation telegrams.
Uh-huh.
So it was a marvelous. It must have been a marvelous time.
Oh, no.
A time of.
Well, I wasn't that interested in the thing, I never thought something. You don't think about things then. You,
That's right. You say when you were young and foolish. Well, then for the Second World War, you were in Omagh. at
I
that
was.
stage. And can you remember?
On a
much-
Sunday morning it was announced.
And how did you hear about it? Where was it announced?
I was walking about in Woodside when I heard it. 1939, wasn't it? I remember paying pensions. There was one, two, three, about 4 different boxes, and it was all pension books. It was all for the husbands, for the wives of the husbands and that. I paid pensions one time for a whole year, did nothing else but pay pensions. And they had to be balanced every night. I'm telling you, there's some hadn't to be done.
There were no calculators or computers.
No, there was not.
So things changed over the years, and I suppose mechanisation.
Everything has made life easier a lot for people.
A lot easier.
Electric and all. I remember in Omagh when I come home, it was gas lamps was on the streets.
And the gas lamps, then somebody would come in and...
Mum would try and put them on every night.
And what kind of lighting then was in the post office?
It was gas too.
And what about the heating? Would there been a coal fire or a stove? Or?
They had some sort of heating, and I don't remember now much about the heating. And now, always felt cold anyway. There was no heating behind the counter at all. See, there was no place for it.
Well, was it mainly women then that worked behind the counters in the post office then?
No, there was men too.
And the postmaster, he was in complete control?
You know the Gallagher's at Campsay, Seamus. Well, it was their father said to my sister, tell Peg to call in when she's home. And I called to see him. He says to me, if you want the job, there's one here if you want it.
He was the postmaster?
So I took it.
Well, was there only one post office in Omagh then?
That's all.
And there was none in Killyclahar, there was none in...
None anywhere.
Just in Omagh itself?
Just Omagh.
And then the next post office then would have been Dromore or Finton?
Some of the sub-offices. They were all sub-offices of Omagh.
And they would have opened 6 days a week as well?
We sent them out all the money. I remember having to send the money out every week to them.
And how would the money be delivered?
It was taken out by the postman.
By the postman? And how many deliveries a day would there have been in Omagh?
There was 2. One in the morning, one in the afternoon.
And then when you started working in the post office in Omagh, if, for example, I wanted to post a letter to London from Omagh, how long would it take to get from Omagh to London?
I don't know that. I did. Well, to be there the next day, I'm sure. Because they went to Belfast, and from Belfast they went there to London, you see.
And I suppose then the trains would have carried a lot of the mail.
There used to sort letters on the trains. I remember used to run one from Derry to Portadown, and the men, I knew the boys working on it, sorting the letters and posting them. And you don't do that now.
Well, how did things change in the post office, or did the workload increase greatly then when the welfare state was established, and then with family allowances?
I think were different then.
Right.
There was more work to be done. When I left the post office. I was young when I left, you see. I was off sick for a year nearly. And the doctor said to me, I think you'd be better give up working. I was only, I must have only been about 40. Sure, how was that?
Well, you must have seen a lot of changes in Omagh, and Killyclahar would be your parish church.
There was no church here then.
None in Strathroy. Well then, Killyclahar, it's almost a part of Omagh now.
The houses go out there now, nearly. You might say the houses right out to Killyclahar.
When you started to go to Killyclahar Church, it was a church out on its own.
It was. There wasn't many houses around Killyclahar then. The first Sunday I was in Omagh, I went to Killyclahar. And I've been going ever since, and that's over 70 years.
Why did you decide to go to Killyclahar?
Well, I liked it. Just, as a matter of fact, the first Sunday I went, this nurse from the hospital that I had met before, I would come to Omagh, I told her, she was Nurse McCartan was her name, from Carrickmore. She says to me, I'm going to Killyclahar to Mass, would you like to come? So I said, of course. So that was my start off.
How did you get out to Killyclahar? Did you walk out to
I walked
Killyclahar?
there every Sunday for years.
I know, it'd been just I suppose looking at it, it'll be just passing just green fields. Very, very few houses.
There was no St. Julian's Way, I'm telling you. There was St. Julian's High and St. Julian's Ride and St. Julian's everything.
Well then, where the Knocknamoe Hotel stood, that then would that have been a private house at that stage?
It was owned by James Campbell then, I think. Remember James Campbell? He brought me up to see it one day.
Well, what was it like?
I was coming from Mass. My sister was with me, coming from Kellyclough, and we met him on the road. We knew him, he was from Drummoy, you see. He said, would you like to see the castle? He said, you can come. I took it up and showed us all around it, and there were statues on height in it.
And what was it like? Was it like
Oh, well,
very imposing?
you know all the fancy things they have on the roof in these houses, all fancy work and that. It was very nice, you know.
And when Campbell got rid of it, then it was turned into an hotel. Was
It
it?
was.
Right. Well then, can you remember the first time you saw a car in Omagh? Can you remember that?
Car. The first car I ever saw was at home, I think.
In the moor.
Uh-huh.
And would it have been
There was cars in Omagh, but Harry Turney, you know Turney's garage, he had the car when I come to Omagh. Because it used to take it up. We used to go up home for the weekend. We used to leave it up.
What were the roads like?
Oh, they were all good enough, better than they are now, I think.
Well then, what would it have been like on, we'll say, a Saturday, when you started to work at the post office, to walk through the streets of Omagh? Would it have been a busy place?
It was very busy. A lot of people in it.
Would it have been
Well,
traffic, so basically
and the bicycles and all sorts of things, and horses and carts maybe, and sidecars and so on. So a Saturday was always a busy day in Omagh. This book doesn't belong to me. I got a woman lent it to me last night to have a look at it. The Dr. Mitchell who wrote this.
Did you know his father?
I remember the father. He was the post office doctor.
That's right.
Well then, what was the post office doctor? Was he was there for the post office employees, or if anything happened?
Well, he was appointed. He was appointed to look after us. If you were sick or anything, you had to send for him.
Well, when you started then in the post office here, how many doctors were in the town? Would there have been many doctors to
In Omagh,
serve the area?
there was a Dr. McAllister. Used to be up in Church Street. There was a lot of different doctors. I forget Dr. Moynihan. And that's my aunt there. She had the post office. And that's my sister. She married a man called O'Reilly from Drummoor. They're still living in Drummoor, Andrew O'Reilly. And that lady there is my godmother. She was working, she worked in the post office there.
And who's she?
She was a Miss Colgan from 5 Mile Town.
And then,
He's a postman.
so these are all postmen. And the youngest now, what would his function have been?
He's a messenger boy, probably.
The messenger boy.
Uh-huh.
And then could the messenger boy then progress and get promotion then to become a postman, and then?
That's right.
Well then, the postmaster, he had complete control over the post
Over the
office.
whole post office.
And would there have been a house?
Well, these sub-offices, like Drummoor in front of them, they were sub-offices of Omagh. Omagh was the head office, you see.
So he would have control over these as well.
Mhm.
And then would he come out and inspect these?
And we send people out there to check the accounts and all that. Send out from Omagh.
I suppose a very responsible position, because then
Mm-hmm.
I suppose everything stopped with him then.
Uh-huh.
And then, if a man was appointed postmaster, how long could he hold that post?
As long as he wanted to.
For years and years.
Uh-huh.
Well then, did the post office double up as a shop or anything like that? The sub post offices.
Some of them did. Some of them had groceries, grocery and that. Sold grocery and stuff like that. But she didn't. My aunt didn't sell anything.
It was a post office, and
Yeah,
that was it. And then, would many people have used the post office like a savings bank?
I suppose they did. I don't. A savings bank doesn't do as much now as it used to do. I think ordinary banks do more, you know. That wee girl there, she would be Cairns now, I think, and she would be our aunt too. Mrs. Cairns, her mother was an aunt of mine as well. Now, she married a fellow called Slavin and Dromore, and their son has the post office in Dromore still.
So this is kind of carried on. And
Generation, because before my aunt took it over, her aunt had it.
you see the way that the postman
Postman
are
dressed.
they're wearing the uniform.
Uh-huh.
Did you have to wear any kind of a
No,
uniform? or
no,
something?
you could wear what you liked.
You weren't told that you had to wear certain colours or certain
No.
style.
Well, one day in Omagh, in the summertime, I came into work with a short sleeved frock on me, and the overseer says to me, "This is not a dance hall."
So
So that was enough.
that was you putting your place. Well, then, just a matter of interest. What about dance halls then? What was the entertainment like? Growing up in
Dancing, it was nice. I used to go to a lot of dance in the courthouse. They used to hold them.
And what kind of dances would have been held
Oh,
there?
waltzes and Germans and Highlands.
And they would have,
That'd be a band, Joe Nugent's band.
and they were from Omagh.
Omagh, they lived in Omagh.
Well then, for example, a dance in the courthouse, what time would it start at?
Oh, about 8 o'clock.
And it would go on.
Go on to 12 or 1.
And would there be refreshments served? Would
But
there be,
some of them danced, if there was a big dance, it would last till the morning. I saw me going home from dance one morning near 4 o'clock. That's a long time ago. There was 3 girls of us walking home out the woodside.
well then,
Frank McElroy, you know the McElroy, you know the McElroys home. Did you know
Very
them?
well, uh-huh.
Frank walked us out, the whole 3 of us.
well then, could you tell me a bit then about when you were growing up in Dromore, what kind of music or musical entertainment would you have had? Would it be
I
just,
played the violin. My brothers played the violin and the melodeon too.
and that would have been Cayley music or traditional
Uh-huh.
music?
I ate music, jigs and things like that.
Can you remember who taught them how to play?
And then they never were taught at all. They just
Just picked it up
picked
themselves?
themselves.
And then, when you went up to Belfast, what was the entertainment like?
Oh, we got in one team at the end of the convent when I pray. You had to come home, sit your work at home. If you turned in the corner, they want to know where you were going.
They were severe. Well then, what about the pictures? Did you go to the pictures at all in Belfast?
No. I never thought of going to the pictures funny when we were at school there.
So the roads must be very
So
severe.
most we hadn't the money anyway, maybe.
Well then, when you went over to England, was there much of a difference in the entertainment there? Or was it
Well,
pretty much
I
the same?
never, funny, I never did anything in England. I never went anywhere to dance or anything in England. Never went any place. You might have went to the pictures occasionally, but otherwise I never did any dancing in it.
Mhm.
I think they were glad to get rid of me in England and send me home again. They told me one day I was on the phone, they didn't understand what I was saying.
Couldn't understand it.
I couldn't understand them.
Do you like it out here? How do you find
I
it?
don't like it, I never liked it, but what could you do? You had to go, we got a house.
That's it. But it's a wee bit removed from the town. It's a wee
It
bit
is,
far from the
uh-huh.
town.
Very quiet though, I mean there's never any noise or nothing like that,
Aye.
but it's far out. Of course we have a shop and we have a church and we have, I mean, a school, so both we're not so badly off.
Aye, but the fair's something like that.
I never go to it, you know, and Father Kevin, you know Father Kevin Mullen,
Uh-huh.
he's always on to me. I met him in the shop the other, he says, were you at that foreign church yesterday? Says, it's not foreign to me, Father. I says, I'm going to 70 years.
Well, of course, his people are an old Omagh family, aren't
Sure,
they?
of course. And they had a shop next door to the post office there nearly. When I worked in, I used to go and see Jerry Mullen. He served in the shop. He looked after the shop.
Right.
Mm.
What kind of shop was it? What did it?
Grocery shop.
Grocery shop.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then there's a brother that opened the extension of the school. Brother Jay.
That's
Is he a relation then?
he's a relation of mine.
Is he?
His mother's my niece.
Right.
That was John Mullen.
John. I have to say it's
But
Jay.
as a matter of fact, John's in Africa now this week.
Right.
His family over here the other night.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very nice man.
John.
Very,
Yes.
very civil. Very.
You know, what do you call him? Brother Edmund Rice, you know, he's going to be beatified, you know,
That's right. In October.
in October. So John sent me out pictures of him to get in the different churches.
Right.
So I asked Father Mullen about it. Father Mullen took one up and put it in that house. And I brought one out to Killyclare myself yesterday and got Terry McGuigan to put it up.
Right, that's right, October, the 6th of October. In fact, we're meeting in the school, we're trying to see how we mark the occasion, and we're going to try and get some big painting of him, or something to do, something
Something
to
big.
mark it, and the Past Pupils Union are trying to raise funds, and I think we need to do something. We're going to have a big concert as well.
Did you meet John that time?
I did. We put on a show at the opening of the school about the history of the school,
Yes.
and I wrote it.
Did
I
you?
produced it, and at 3 o'clock in the morning before the school was opened, we were shunting up and down ladders trying to fix lights and that, and he was there. And I thought, well, he was he was prepared to muck in with the rest of us to help us out. And it went down great, and he was very, very pleased with it, because we told the story of the history of the school through the songs of the time.
That's right.
From Thomas Moore medleys at the start, right through to a song by, was it Frank McCrory?
Frank, yeah.
McCrory.
Frank worked with me in the post office. He was very quiet, sort of fellow, Frank. But he was very musical.
Yes.
Great music man.
Right.
And,
And would he sing the songs that he wrote for you, or
no, he wouldn't do
That
it.
wasn't part of the work.
No, he wouldn't do anything like that,
what about Ben Cayley? He was, of course, a native of Dromore.
He was.
And did you ever have any experiences with him, or did you know him?
I knew Ben too. He was in the post office for a while, and left it and went away. And I remember him he visited the lady next door to me in Woodside. He was sort of a relation of hers. And he called one day. He called with me too. He comes back here often, doesn't he?
That's right.
The
He's
wrong
down
one.
in Dublin now, and he goes back occasionally. I didn't realise he had worked in the post office.
He
What
only-
did he do in the post office?
He just worked at the counter and other places like the rest of us. Or did the rest of us done.
And nobody had any inkling then that he would go on.
No.
He was such a well-known
He didn't stay long in the post office, and never left, went away to be a priest or something.
That's right. That's right. And then went into the journalism and then into writing. Well, then he met a very famous resident of Mountfield, a woman called Alice Milligan.
Oh, I remember hearing about how she lived in Mountfield right
She
now.
lived in Mountfield, in the lodge in Mountfield. She died in 1953. And she'd been born in Campsie, or just at the swinging bars at a house. She lived
Yeah.
there in a house there,
That big house there.
a big house there just at the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Her father built that house. But she had met Ben Cayley many years ago. Well, as you look back over your long number of years working in Omagh and around Omagh, are there any characters that would stand out in your mind? Anybody that you would say this? For example, I was chatting to Tom Sweeney, the singer, and he was telling me about seeing a street singer. He said it must have been one of the last of the street singers, just standing on a corner, singing and collecting.
I wonder who that was now.
So he wrote a beautiful song about him,
Didn't
and
he?
he wrote a beautiful song about John Street. And how things had
About
changed.
John Street.
How things had changed over the years in John Street.
Uh-huh.
Are there any people in the post office that would stand out in your mind?
Charlie O'Donnell. He lived in Campsie, Charlie. His photo's in that book.
Why, what was Charlie like, or what?
He was a nice, very nice fella, Charlie.
Right,
He never got married either.
right.
Remember Tom McGuigan? Remember Tom?
Taxi man.
Yeah.
Taxi man. Yes,
he
very
lived to be a brave age, didn't he?
As well.
Well, then we were looking at how Omagh had changed over the years. I believe that there used to be gambling went on in the back market. Did you ever come across that, or did you ever hear? Was it pitch and toss and various? It was off Bridge Street.
There was a place off Bridge. Funny, it's a place I never was in my life. I never was across that street.
No, I was reading Jude Collins' book called Boo and the Bishop, and it mentions the back market where the gambling.
Back market. I suppose they used to back horses and things in it.
That must have been it. That must have been it. I don't remember it myself. Right, he was a bread man.
It was.
Right, where did Vincent come from?
Gordon.
Right. And you remember him working then in the town?
I remember him going out the bread cart.
Right.
He married one of the governments of Tamlet Road. I knew them girls very well. And
Well, the bread cart, what was it been? Was it a horse drawn?
it was a horse drawn one he had in the beginning.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And could you remember what wares that he would sell? You know, what, was it all homemade bread or buns, or what kind of stuff would he sell?
He mostly sold Mother's Pride. Who's his own said it? English's bread.
English's.
That was it.
Can you remember who opened the model bakery?
No, the modern bakery was there when I come to town.
And that's down Sudan Avenue.
It
That
was
was,
closed anyway.
right, was that
Trainers.
Trainers owned that?
They had had it one time, but they hadn't it very long.
No. Who owned it before them? Do you know, Peggy? Do you remember?
Somebody lived up in, forget his name now. He was the manager of the bakery. He had people employed there.
Mm-hmm. Of the model bakery. Well, how many bakeries would have, when you started in the post office here, for example, how many bakeries would there have been in the town?
Just the one.
That was the model bakery, and that would have served the whole area. Well, then, had there been a bakery in Dromore?
No, I had no bakery. I never knew him to have a bakery in Dromore.
Right. So there's only a place maybe the size of Omagh that would have that.
Mm-hmm.
That would have that.
McNulty's might have had a bakery in Dromore.
Well, then, I suppose on the same line, then, do you know anything about Scott's Mill at all? And
No, it was there when I come to town.
Right.
I remember Madden Scott. Madden lived on the Gorton Road there, and that, who's it lives in it now? A man called McGuigan, I think. Do you know?
That's McGuigan.
Madden lived there.
That's right. That's right.
Well, then, when you came to work in the post office in Omagh, I suppose there would have been a handful of families in the town that would have been, say, the local landowners, they would have owned the bulk of the land.
Well, I know that the Michaeliers at Campsie owned the whole of the Woodside Terrace, 12 houses, where I lived, the houses where I lived, they owned the whole 12.
Right.
We paid rent to them.
And then there would have been the Monaghan's.
The Monaghan's didn't own much.
They owned the ground Omagh Camp was built on, Peggy, didn't
Hmm?
they? They owned the ground the camp was built on, Omagh Camp, Army Camp there. That was Monaghan's ground.
Oh, aye, that's right. I am up on the hill. They lived up the Snelly Lane up there, remember?
That's right.
Now,
Do you remember the Army coming to the town?
Army was always here.
The Americans.
Uh-huh.
I saw Americans knocking about, but didn't know much about them. You taking that all
Not
day?
yet, no, you okay, you okay?
Don't put that in the book.
Oh, no, you're
As many's a gay night from dark till daylight I spend with people of high renown. But in all their grandeur and heaps to squander, my heart would wander for sweet Omagh town.